Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition with Hunter Design Company. My name is Evan, and today I'm going to take you through the chess pieces that I made. So I made an epoxy chessboard, and originally when I was making this chessboard I was intending on buying pieces, but when I got looking, you could get some really cheap, inexpensive pieces that are like plastic, and I just didn't want to go that route. And then the really nicer pieces were really expensive. So I decided that I was going to make my own, and this is going to be a walkthrough of how I did it. I will say at the top here, one thing I would note is that my chess squares are 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. If I had to do this project again, I would probably trim the wood down a little smaller. I trimmed it down to 1 inch by 1 inch, which is a little big for those squares. So I would probably trim it down to 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch, making the pieces a little less bulky. They take up a little less room on the board. But overall, I think they turned out pretty good, especially for my first time ever making chess pieces.
So here I do want to note that this entire project was made from scrap wood. So here I have some scrap walnut that I am trimming down to 1 inch by 1 inch. And then I'm getting my cross-cutting sled out here so I can measure out the different heights of all these pieces. I will say I probably would recommend cutting a few extra of each height, just so that in case you do mess up, you don't have to go back like I did several times and cut new pieces. So you can see there I have some scrap maple as well, and I'm cutting the maple sizes for both the black and the white chess pieces. I'm using that little square edge there to make sure that everything is consistent, and I have the block set for each piece, making sure that every cut is accurate and precise. So here I'm starting with the pawns, and I am adding a little bit of detailing, and this is a simple matter of setting the height of the blade and making sure you don't cut your fingers, basically. You'll see that I'm using a pencil there to hold the pieces in place. The rooks were probably the most challenging piece, and that was because I found out that some of my cuts were not exactly 90 degrees. So when I was making the tops of these rooks, they were turning out kind of slanted. But I eventually got there, and it went smoothly after that. So next, I went to the table saw, and I made a 45-degree cut for the bishops and the horse heads. You can see there I had a couple practice pieces just to make sure that I had my cuts exactly where I wanted them. And like I said, again, this is where having a few extra pieces came in handy. You can see there I have all of the angles cut, and now I am cutting the back angle into the face of those bishops. Now here I'm setting up the queen. The queen, I took 4 cuts on the top to make a pyramid shape. And you see there, I decided to trim down the king and the queen a little bit just because they were taking up too much space on the board. So those did get trimmed down to a little less than 1 inch apiece. And here you can see that I am working on the king. So the king, the first cut I made was wrong, and it stumped me for a second. But then I realized that all I had to do was make sure that the blade was going halfway through the piece at a 45-degree angle, and you'll end up with this really neat crown design, as you can kind of see there in the background. So then I had my pieces pretty much where I wanted them, and then I decided to add a little bit of detailing. So I went through and I added a little notch on the bottom of all the pieces, at the exact same position, so you could tell which piece, the bottom for each piece. Especially for the pawns, that would be a little tricky if you didn't have it there. And then sanding. Lots and lots of sanding. The belt sander made this a lot faster, but when I got to the detailed sanding, I needed to do hand sanding. For instance, in those notches that I cut out, definitely had to hand sand all those little notches, which was time consuming for sure. And then up next, I actually set up a few squares. So this is 120, 150, 220, and 320. And I only use the 320 to chamfer the edges. And finally, I'm putting the felt on the bottom. And here's our finished product. This whole project took me about 3 days to complete. The chess pieces themselves I got done in a single day, with the exception of finish. I used walrus oil as a finish on these pieces, and I think they turned out pretty good. Hit that subscribe button. Drop any questions down in the comment section, and I will try to get back with you. Thanks a lot. Happy building.